but he's able to makes it win anything. Sam, defend your team because they haven't won.
Strap yourselves in, it's another 1 hour episode.
Oh yeah.
Spike defused.
Welcome to Press Forward to Defuse, your weekly spot for Valorant esports news and discussion. Welcome back, everybody. We've got a lot to talk about this week. I'm joined by my usual co-hosts. We got Ryan and Sam. How are we doing today, Ryan?
Yeah, doing well. Lots to talk about as we don't get a quiet week. You know, usually on a podcast, you're kind of like, oh, there might not be much to talk about. We've had like full on like 12 weeks of too much stuff to talk about, and Masters 2 is just looming on the horizon now, so it's going to get even more crazy.
I remember when
I can't keep up.
We were first making this podcast, we came up with all these good segments we could do if we needed to fill time and all these different gimmicks and things we could have. We haven't been able to do them in months, ever since the VCT started, because it's just like every week there's just more Valorant. Take it, cram it down your throat. More Valorant news. Sam, how are you feeling?
Pretty good. I think we get like a whole week between when all the challenges end and then Reykjavik, like a week or two. So maybe we'll get some downtime there. We can do some more rants to rate. You know, Ryan was doing a wonderful one off screen just 5 minutes ago.
All I said is I want more variance in music on the VCT streams is all I said. Like, I mean, Got Money is a bop, but like the rest, it just all kind of blurs into one. It's like listening to The Weeknd. It's just all the same stuff over and over again. Anyway.
Sarah, we've got in CS, we've got a few bops. There's one Sarah that every time it comes on, the chat just starts spamming Sarah and Bible thumps. It's great. We are going to get into the news here, though, since we do have a lot to get into. Run it back. This is our weekly segment where we talk about what's happened in the last week, some of the new news, some of the news stories, a lot of roster moves. And we're going to start with one that's going to make me very sad. Sad and happy. It's bittersweet. I'm sad in the CS part of my brain. I'm very happy for the Valorant scene because Floppy and Zeppa are coming to Cloud9 Blue. We're getting the Flopster. We're getting Mr. Zeppa himself. I mean, these are two really big gets. And I know you guys may not get the full context of it, but these players are wildly talented. I'm just going to set the scene a little bit because I've been following these guys' career for years. Super talented player, incredibly mechanically gifted. Floppy's joining the roster right away. Zeppa, I think, is going to join the roster, but take some more time to actually transition to the active lineup since he hasn't been playing Valorant as much. Mechanically, gods. Immensely high skill ceiling. They were part of the Cloud9 Colossus CS team. That project exploded, disbanded. There are very few opportunities in NACS right now, much to my great sorrow. And so they're under contract with Cloud9. They're moving over to the Cloud9 Blue team. Big get for Cloud9 Blue. Big get. Super talented players. Might take a while for them to transition, but I will be honest, these are two more of the names. There's been a few of these guys over the course of the Valorant. Like, a lot of people have moved over, but there's been the tentpole players. There's been Nitro. There's been players like Ethan, Steele. These are in that category where I'm looking at them and I'm going, okay, these guys are going to be forces in the Valorant scene for a long time. How do we feel about these moves, Sam?
You are asking the wrong person. Okay, so obviously I don't know a terrible amount about CS, but what I do know is that C9 up until very recently, and we've mentioned this a few times, have looked lackluster at best. But in a very amazing resurgence quite recently, they've managed to snag themselves some pretty damn good results. And I believe that Floppy was playing with them in their most recent. Was he not yet?
Just made the move.
Okay.
Just made the move. He's taking
okay,
Relic's spot.
just made it. That makes sense then. All right. Well, that being said, new blood is necessary because they had been on a little bit of a downward tear. I'm kind of sad to see Relics go. He's been kind of a staple, been around the scene for quite some time, and really hoping that he'll get snatched up somewhere else along the line. But if these guys are as good as you say they are, and we know how much you sung the praises of the likes of Ethan, and we can see how much he's been doing for 100 Thieves, then yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what they bring to the table.
Mike, if you were to make like a tier list of the players that have moved over, where does Zeppa and Floppy like fill in for where Nitro and Dazed and all of these other ex-CS people have moved over?
So it's interesting. So Nitro's top. He was a little bit on a downswing in his CS career, but he has the highest achievements of pretty much anyone who's moved over in the NA scene. Steel, the only reason he didn't have similar levels of achievement was his ban, so I'm putting those guys up there. Ethan, player at the top in terms of mechanical skill. So that's like I would say like the cream of the crop. There's probably someone I'm forgetting on in that, but these are the cream of the crop. For Zeppa and Floppy, they didn't have that level of career achievement because they should have been on their upswing in CS, right? They were finally getting their breakthroughs into top tier rosters, into international competition, and they were showing up well. Mechanically, very up there. They were in a bit of a rough team environment with the whole Cloud9 project that failed because boot camps weren't possible and this, that, and the other thing. Expectations were too high. There were a lot of outside factors around it, but their individual skill level, they showed up and they've shown up. Zeppa, before being part of the C9 project, was part of the Chaos roster that wound up pretty much all coming into Valorant. That's where we get Vanity. That's where we get Leaf. That's where we get MCE coaching. Like that whole project has become a Valorant team pretty much, or different pieces of different Valorant teams. So I would say they're like the second tier. They didn't have the level of achievement as some of those huge names, but they might have gotten there in the future. They have huge promise. So the exciting thing about players like Floppy and Zeppa, as opposed to players like, I don't want to name names on this one, but players who were on the downswing of their career and made the
like
transition.
Dazed
these
and
guys
Daps,
are rising.
those that have a bit more.
Dazed
like,
wasn't on the
experience.
downswing of his career. His career was long gone, dead, and buried. They dug it out of the graveyard and pulled his corpse out of it. Like he wasn't competing and hadn't been for years. Players like Hayes, Hayes hadn't been competing but still had something of a career, or like Drone, where Drone had sort of been out of the limelight for a long time, coming back over. These are guys who were building and they've made the transition, so that's exciting.
For sure. I think the only thing to sort of really note as well is that we go back to Cloud9 being a 6-man roster right now, because from the looks of it, for Floppy and Zeppa, they're not fully dedicated to playing Valorant at this point, which sounds a bit weird. So I think that sort of between them, they're trying to work out like which one is going to fill that 5th slot. Maybe TenZ comes back into that team at some point and nobody needs to fill in that slot at all. We really don't know at this point, but it does seem that for both of these players, whilst they're ready to sort of take a bit of a leap with Valorant, that they're not dedicating fully and probably waiting for, the world to open up again for NA Counter-Strike to maybe give these guys more opportunities. So I don't think it's dead and buried for these guys in Counter-Strike just yet, Mike. So you don't need to cry too hard.
It is. It is. My hope for them to come, Zeppa maybe someday in the future. Floppy, I think, is making this transition. Zeppa, I think, was more reticent about doing it. I don't think he wants to make the move, but it's just the reality of the opportunities and the fact that he has a really good contract with Cloud9, and provided they're just moving that over. I mean, there were 3-year contracts, I think, that they initially signed, and they pay a decent monthly salary. So if he's coming back over, if he fully commits into Valorant and embraces the game, watch out, everybody else. I mean, this is the thing where, like, Valorant pros are all excited when these players get announced when they're making the move over. They're like, yeah, welcome. No, you should not be welcoming them. They're taking your jobs. They are taking your jobs. I mean, there are obviously players who don't need to worry about that. But there are other players who I see celebrating these announcements. You should not be happy about this. All right, I'm gonna move us on.
What is the expression when the tide rises, ships rise, or whatever it's called?
Yes, rising
High tide
raises
raises all
boats.
ships.
Yeah.
There it is. Maybe that's what they're going for.
Maybe raises the level. Certainly, there's a limit on how many roster spots there is. I'm gonna move on because otherwise I'll cry about this for the entire show. Next announcement: Moon Raccoons are getting an org. Probably the Moon Raccoons Black, their women's team, are released from Moon Raccoons. It's not an actual org. It's just a dude who markets unsigned players, which is super cool for him to do. But the only reason why they would part ways with Moon Raccoon, since there's no contracts or anything tying them to the org, is because they're getting signed. So we'll see who's going to sign that. Sam, you got any leaks?
I wish.
You're our
tell
on-scene reporter for the women's Valorant scene.
Oh, please. I may be on scene, but I don't get leaks, all right? The leaks that I get are from you guys.
The trick I've learned to figure out where players are going to sign is when you realize they're about to sign somewhere because of like an announcement like this, you just DM them the eyes emoji, and like half of them will just immediately tell you where they're actually signing. It's great. I put this into effect so many different times just to beg for leaks.
When is the next like North American like Game Changers tournament?
We don't know.
Is it soon? Do we have
Nobody
no
knows.
idea? Right. So like,
I'm
that's
assuming they're going to
interesting.
go through all the other regions before we circle back to NA, but I could be wrong.
It seems like an EU one's probably next on the docket. I think they're going to do an NA Game Changers Academy, which is where they're going to do like a little bit more of a league
like
thing.
Just starting this weekend,
Oh,
I
right,
think,
yeah,
with
yeah.
Valorant. Yeah.
So I think that's the next plan. I'd imagine we won't get one till like end of summer or fall would be my guess. Like if you're doing like four a year or like 3 or 4 a year, you're doing them by quarters, that kind of thing. That would make sense to me. We'll move on now because
cool.
We don't know where they're signing, but it's cool that another team's getting signed. Yay. Version 1 making some moves. A team that's had a lot of very good results right now. They're releasing player 1. Seems like it was kind of his decision, kind of not. They hadn't been playing with him. Whippy's been standing in. Seems like Whippy's going to be signed. What do we make of this? A team that's been having some of their best results. Now they make a move, Ryan. What do you think?
Well, I mean, like, it's probably a good time for Player 1, I suppose. Like, right now, there's still a chance for Version 1 to keep playing through these Russian dolls of qualifiers to make their way to Masters 2. Clearly, he just needed a bit of space. He has been playing since the closed beta of last year with the likes of Gen G, and it's been pretty full-on since. So I understand the move, but it couldn't have come at a worse time for Version 1 and the rest of the team, right? They're in for the closed qualifiers of Challengers 2. They have a great opportunity and a pretty interesting bracket that they can do quite a lot in, which we'll talk about later. But this is a big hit, I suppose. Whippy, I don't really know much about the guy or how impactful he's going to be. There's been some stand-ins for like Nature and Immortals that have done quite a lot of work so far. So it remains to be seen. But I like Player 1. I've always liked him. I like the fact that he got picked up by Version 1 after the drop from Gen G. So I hope all the best for him, to be honest.
Sam, what do you make of it?
I was a Player 1 fan, and it was one of the reasons that I stand Version 1 after they initially got announced in Player 1 Effies, some of the other players that had been around for quite some time. So I was definitely a fan there. But as sad as it is for the team, I'm a big advocate of looking after yourself. So if this was something that was necessary for whatever reason, then I'm behind it 100%. Whatever happens to the team happens. But I think it means way more for a person to make sure that they're okay and they're in their right space. Maybe he comes back. Hopefully he comes back. But for now, let him do his thing, and we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah, I'm a little sad about it. So PL1, Player 1, was a CS player for a long time, and he stepped back from the CS scene to go to school. I think he wound up doing like criminal justice or something. I thought he was a dentist. It's either that I thought he was a dentist and he studied criminal justice, or I thought he studied criminal justice and he studied dentistry. It's one of those two things. He clarified it for me at one point. I think it was that he studied criminal justice and I thought he was studying to be a dentist. Whatever it is, he stepped back from competing in CS. He has a lot of individual talent and has for years. So I was super happy to see him come back in Valorant because it's like, oh, here's a name I haven't seen in a long time, but always kind of wanted to come back. But if he's stepping away again, like he might just be the kind of guy for whom competing is not really like he did it for a year and it's like, you know what? This isn't it for me. It's a specific, very particular lifestyle. And for many people, it's the dream. But if it's not your dream, it's honestly pretty miserable. You spend a lot of hours and like the game that you love becomes work. It's just going to some degree. You've got to have that drive. And if you don't, I completely get taking a step back and reevaluating what you might want to do. Like, it just makes sense. One other fun version 1 piece of news. I loved seeing this. They released the Vanity
God.
cat ears. We've got cat ears in game. Yeah, pull up the announcement. Oh, so good. They're little Velcro cat ears that stick to your headphones. And this, I put a tweet out about it. This is how you capitalize on a player's brand. Vanity loves his cat ears on his headphones. It started as a joke when he was on Chaos, and then he just kept them forever, and it's become his thing. So any cat boys in chat, just get yourself some cat ears, slap them on there, and rep
massively
version 1.
disappointed to see that it was an accessory and not actual headphones. Like, if it was actual headphones, I might have been in it, but like, I don't wear headphones.
Version 1, send them to me. I will wear them. I will devolve myself for this.
I'll do it.
I'm your biggest fan. Give me your ears.
I'll rep. I love Vanity. He's a nutter.
Yeah, I think they're great.
He's such a troll. I would wear some big Tony cat
Press
ears.
4 to Defuse version 1 ear episode.
There we go. Yeah, we just all have the ears on. Yeah, sponsors.
Yes.
Look, if you want to send us merch, we'll wear your merch and then rip it.
I don't know about a podcast being sponsored by a team, but I'm very happy to be sponsored by cat ears overall. So let's see how it goes.
I think we should do team sponsorship episodes where they send us a bunch of merch and then we specifically rip into everything we see wrong with their team. It'll be like a weird cognitive dissonance episode.
Like the
on to the next
anti-shills, yeah.
Tangents
on to the next
everywhere.
episode. On to the next subject. Sword picked up a roster. They picked up the Pokestars roster, which I'm super happy about because my boy Nerfed, my boy Jimbo Slice, Big Jimmy, the big frame himself, is now signed back to a roster. And I'm just going to soapbox this for a little bit. Way back, he was signed with that original Renegades roster, right? And then they cut him. And that was a classic example of a team signing, or an org signing a team and not understanding the team, because he was a leader for them. He was a vocal leader, an emotional leader, and I think he called for them as well. And then they sucked for like 6 months until they finally picked up Strong Legs and got Roy back in there to be that vocal leader. Turns out, even if the guy's not popping on the scoreboard, if he is leading the team emotionally and literally, maybe don't cut him. But this team has been dominating like open circuit NA for a while.
Mm-hmm.
This collection of players, just as a pug, they've been winning VCSs, they've been winning open qualifiers, they've been winning this, that, and the other thing. It's kind of a cool pickup for Sora to get them in here. What do we think, Sam?
They have actually been doing super well in what I would term the like tier 2 scene. I know we don't have like an established tier system yet, but I feel like if you're performing exceptionally well outside of VCT, that makes you top tier 2. Because like the top of VCT would be more like your tier 1 teams. That's the way I see it in my head. If you don't follow that logic, that's a you problem. Anyway.
Yeah, okay. Continue.
So in my head, they've like been doing really well in like the quote unquote tier 2 scene. And they actually had some really good results against C9 just before C9 hit that like massive upswing very recently. So I mean, this is still a team that I'm looking at. I hadn't really been looking at them prior to this because we kind of obviously focus most of our energy on what's going on in VCT. But when a team is doing well in other tournaments and they're doing that well, you kind of you got to sit up and take notice. And this is one of those teams that's been making that happen.
Ryan, you got any thoughts on this roster?
It's hard to say, again, for somebody that's sort of been mostly focusing on VCT. We haven't seen Sora or Pokestars get into even like the sort of round the 16 games, right? So they're sort of away from a lot of the other teams that are trying to slip into some of these spots that are maybe left open by some of the open teams. So it's really hard to gauge or really sort of pay too much attention to them in the grand scheme of things. But with the tournaments that are happening at the moment, stuff like the summer championships and stuff in Street Gamers, it's a great circuit for them to be working on. And it seems that Pokestars are just going from strength to strength. It would be super cool to see them have a bit of an upset win over some of the other bigger teams that have been playing in VCT more frequently. But we'll have to wait and see on that one.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. I will say about this roster, from what I've seen of them, I think Cryocells is nuts, and a player to keep an eye on. And there's a few others in there where you just want to keep an eye on them. There's a lot of talent there. There's some players that I recognize from way back when. Obviously, Nerfed I've known for years at this point. He does not fit the mold of the typical esports player. He's married with children, like has a very stable nuclear family, and like in New York, and
he's not a degenerate like the rest.
I
of
don't know
us.
if he still has it. He used to be like a systems analyst or consultant, like have a real like demanding profession. I wonder if he still does. Because
him and Mummy should hang out more. Him and Mummy should set up their own little.
Honestly,
Wall Street.
no, they were like not of a dissimilar age and like similar industries. So it's kind of funny in that regard. He discovered competition super late and discovered it was his passion. But it's cool to see him signed again. I do want to get into a debate about your definition of tier list, Sam, but I'm restricting myself because it'll take way too long.
Idea.
But I wildly disagree with your notion.
When we get a quiet week of Valorant in 2042, we can talk about that.
I'm into it. All right, moving on to the next announcement. Hopping across the pond. This is the announcement that we knew was happening for like a month, and they just didn't announce it. BDS have officially signed Opportunists, and look, we've talked about the fact that this roster was going to be BDS for a while. I want to talk about how weird that announcement video was. They're like androids. They're building them. They're like choking out the engineer. Like, what the hell? This dystopian craziness.
Cool.
It was like Cyberpunk, but 6 months too late. Really, it was really weird.
That was great. What I mean, the acting wasn't amazing, but I imagine. I mean, they weren't going to hire freaking Angelina Jolie or whatever for their video, so to be expected. But the concept was really cool. Like, they're building a team of androids with like built-in aim assist, quote unquote, that are just gonna like destroy the competition because they're machines and that's what they're programmed to do.
It was the seal lock bags. It was the seal lock bags. Like, is that like an asphyxiation kink? It was so weird to see them like.
They looked like body bags. It was a little.
It wasn't even like they were just there like just like completely like comatose. Like,
this is very weird.
Great way to show. Yeah, your team are machines, but they're not also something that you find at like the back of a Costco in like the £1 toy aisle. Like, come on, BDS.
If you haven't seen this video, I highly recommend watching it because it's just so like, what were they going for? I also like the specific language of what they were saying, where they're like, they'll do what we tell them to. It's like, man, you really want to sign that contract right now? They just said you're machines that they will abuse to win masters and nothing else.
Okay, I think you're reading too much into this, Mike.
Look, all I'm saying is after I watched that video, if I was a player, I would go back and read my contract again to figure out what I just signed up for, because it was getting a little weird. All right, moving on. We're spending way too much time on this. We're going to blow through some stuff. Do we want to talk about this? I'm going to skip. We're running out of time. Equinox picked up some teams. We don't know anyone on them. They've signed 2 teams. This was their whole
one player on them.
Okay, Sam knows one, the substitute, right?
Yeah, one of the subs.
Is South African.
South African player was pretty big in the Apex scene.
I like that. It's like, they're South African. Like, you probably like live next door to them. It's just one of those things that like, it's a massive country, but because you know this one player from this region, that's it.
Yes, of course.
It's funny. So this was their like local tryout thing. So I guess your South African player, he says he's a student athlete in the US. I guess he's in Oklahoma. Bold choice, but whatever. All right, we're going to move on. We got to get into the actual events, the meat and the potatoes of what we're actually supposed to be doing here. All right, so starting off into the Challengers events we had last week, we have EU Challengers 2. It's already done. We know who's moving through. Fnatic win. Liquid are also moving it through. That was the final 3-1 victory for Fnatic over Liquid in the grand final. 2 of these orgs that have been struggling of late show up at the right time to make the Challengers finals. Was that expected? Was this super shocking? I feel like they hadn't had the results prior to this. Obviously, Fnatic just made a huge change, but for Liquid, this was even a little bit more surprising as well. The Jumpy effect, what's going on here, Ryan?
I mean, the game against BDS was the most weird because BDS were coming in pole position. They were 1-0 up. They were, on match point for they were almost on match point for quite some time. They had 11 rounds on bind. And then just Team Liquid turned something on. Like, Link was clutching, Scream was putting in the typical performance that he usually did, and then BDS were just boomed by the time that they got to Ascent. Really odd. I honestly think the Team Liquid wasn't the better team in that series, but if you're playing in the semi-final of qualification for BDS, you need to close out those games, otherwise stuff like this happens, right? So, a bit of a weird one. If that series was played again, would it be the same result? I don't know, but Fnatic looks so much better with their additions of Durka and Magnum. Durka especially sort of coming in and just dictating the whole pace. I think he was the player of the week for VCT Europe as well, as expected, right? It's nice to see both these teams on the upward trajectory, but now they're going into a hell of a bracket with so many strong teams.
My biggest question mark was triple Duelist on Split.
They permaban it. They don't play it. So I get, because it's a best of 5, they're like, well, we have to play Split, so let's play triple Duelist with Boaster on Reina.
Like, of all the things. Crazy. I think that the Liquid result was definitely a surprise for me. I was not expecting them to do that well. G2 Fnatic was a bit of a coin flip for me. But past that, since Fnatic had won it, then it became expected, I suppose. Ascend, like we spoke about this last week, and like what is going to happen with Ascend, because there was that whole thing about how they had the coach talking to them during the round, and was that going to make a difference, and how are they looking? And I guess it made a difference. I don't want to say that with like finality and like 100% certainty, but
they looked
changed.
They looked pretty poor.
The thing is, they were a surprise during the first Masters, right? Like that was a surprise that they did that well, and it's looking more and more as time goes on like that was an outlier event, as opposed to like, oh, they're suddenly at the top. It's like, oh, they overperformed for Masters 1. Like that was awesome, but you gotta repeat if you're going to be taken seriously at the top of the scene. The thing that I find really interesting is someone who, I mean, obviously I actually watched I watched a fair amount of this EU Challengers anyway, but I watched even more of it because Ryan was doing some of the coverage. But
I can't believe I threw out my back like 4 rounds in. I literally like turned like this, and then I was like, there's a moment where you hear me cast, and my word when I'm like, I don't have anything to say because something's distracting me, is yeah, that's interesting. And I'm like, yeah, that's interesting. You hear like the life essence just leave out of my body. It was just...
Wasn't it in First Strike where you nearly fell off your chair as well?
I swear, I'm gonna like next year I'll be on like Masters 2 in Reykjavik again, and just like a volcano rock will just fall on me mid-cast.
We need to get you on the yoga meta to prevent that back throw out. Core exercise.
Yeah, that's the first ever back pain I've ever had. It's just really? Like, all right, congrats on getting VCT. You're now a boomer, so congratulations.
Well, speaking as someone who's had my fair share of back pain and a family history of it, if you need some advice after the show, I got it for you. But we'll move on to talk about this actual stuff. For me, from the outside looking in, it looked like the orgs were finally like showing why they'd invest into their teams. We saw Fnatic top, Liquid top. I mean, BDS and Vitality just out of it. Apart from BDS, who'd been doing consistently well and hadn't been announced before, those 3 teams had been massively disappointing really since their orgs picked them up. Liquid, longer history, obviously. But this is where we're finally seeing the show through of like, oh, yeah, that's why they picked up these rosters. Would you guys agree with that?
There was a bit of a recuperation. I'll let Sam talk about that, because I think the only thing that we really sort of learned from this as well is we really do need double elimination at this point. I think Europe has done really good at sort of answering a lot of the complaints, more streams of qualifiers, best of ones now be best of threes, but I feel so bad for opportunists, BDS now, and Ninjas in Pajamas that have got so close on 2 occasions. And all right, you've lost this single elim game. You have to go for all of the qualifiers again. Complete opposite to North America. And if there was a double elimination, for a fact, we would have had other teams qualify in their stead, the more consistent ones. So I think it's a necessity at this point, considering just how brutal the brackets are.
Pam?
I think that thought point of like, oh, now we get why you picked up these players, only really applies, in my opinion, to Liquid.
Okay.
Because they were the ones that had a good going and then just started to really fall off, and no one knew what the hell happened to them. And now they're starting to hit a bit of a resurgence. Like, okay, now we're seeing what we wanted to be seeing from these players. The other teams, they've had slight dips. I mean, even Fnatic, who, when there was Summon FC, they came second at First Strike, and then they hit like a little bit of a wobbly patch during the first like stage 1 of VCT. But they've hit their upswing again. They're performing very well once again. FPX have always been consistently kind of up there. Guild maybe fits your mold. Because like they got picked up as Bonk, they were doing reasonably well as Bonk, but when they hit their downward, that's when they got picked up. And again, it took a little while for them to hit their stride. So okay, Guild and Liquid definitely fit your mold, but I think for the rest, they've been fairly consistent. And then there's G2, who's in like the opposite swing. Now we're going, why did you pick up these players?
Yeah. I will say I'm gonna move us on because we got to move on. But Oh, I had some clever comment and it's escaped my mind. So we're just gonna keep moving here. Oh yeah, Yumpy is now unbanned in Counter-Strike finally after he already moved.
Yeah,
you could tell with the way that he was playing in that final game. Like, Jesus Christ, I've never seen somebody throw themselves at the team. Like, I've not seen anybody that goes, yeah, that's very smart play from Yumpy there. Like, really understand. Most people are like, what are you doing, man? I mean, I get it. It was kind of a seeding match, and I appreciate when like players come into the game and don't go, we're just going to play it like Counter-Strike. You know, people like Daps to kind of come in with that very set mindset on how they want to do stuff, and Dazed apparently as well with that fraud interview. But I guess the point is that Yampi came in and he's trying to push the levels of what you can do with Jet, which is fine, but he's already pushed beyond what is acceptably there when it comes to not being picked up in a straitjacket and sent somewhere else, right? It was insane. Not in a good way insane. It was just insane.
Well, we'll see if the insanity continues or if maybe he's going to make a transfer back to Counter-Strike somewhere down the line. All right, moving us on. NA, back to NA. NA Challengers 2 qualifier happened. I think we've actually got a video for this one, so let's run the video. Roll the tape. Show the film.
One enemy remaining. Flawless.
Spike planted. Oh boy.
And King's left 2 free kills in, maybe even 3. No one spotted him. Doesn't even have to dismiss. 4th kill, possibly.
Spectre in hand. Does destroy the recon bolt, but they know at least someone's there. The Lear comes on by.
This is huge. Panzer's gone. The trains go through. Sure, Sick coming into the back with a double.
One enemy remaining.
Good attempt.
Come on, let's go!
Sova removed. 3 down.
All by himself. Doesn't matter what he uses. 4 kills for Plix. And Thief from behind. He wants to take down a heal. It works. Thief with the speed, and he takes down a second. Thief. She is here. Your boy Duran on the front lines runs right into the hole that Android has set up with this wall. He's still looking for more. He still has a satchel to potentially get some more. Get the 4th on top of the wall. He takes on that first contact. This is going to be an easy one and done for Precision. He has a Sheriff to work with. The Hunter's Theory choking him out. Android gets the kill, and he gets...
Responds, but not for long.
Oh my goodness,
May has found himself in this corner, catches Curry off guard, still has the dash as well, the peek.
That was on Corey. He can now get the resurrection, and Faze are falling apart. It's down to the last up. Sabrosa finds a 3K on the round. Make it for the Hunter.
There we go. A little bit of hype, a lot of hype.
Some of those kills were illegal. They're just illegal.
It's rude. Just
that Skadoodle snap on the last kill against Faze through the smoke is just machine like. Really good casting as well. Shout out to Keg and Evil Cat for making their debut on the stream as well. Just really good casting. I hope that when it comes to like region locking casting and stuff, I hope that they at least let other up and coming casters from other regions do like open qualifiers and stuff in the future. But man, you gotta love that we get people on the stream to show their abilities casting. Super cool. So more of that.
More of that indeed.
More of that in EU.
Let's talk about who made it through though. Let's talk about it. We have 4 teams qualified. Sentinels, NRG, T1, TSM have qualified into the closed event, the main event, the Challengers 2 event. They'll join C9, Andbox, Immortals, and BBG. Now, notably, I think most notably, 3 Challengers teams didn't make it through, right? Last time it was, 3 Masters teams. Last time it was 4 Masters teams. This time Sentinels goes, all right, we're supposed to be the best team in the world. Let's, come on, guys, qualify. But FaZe, Gen.G, and Luminosity all failed to make their way into Challengers 2. All missed their last opportunity at the Challengers finals. Hugely disappointing, obviously, but like how much long-term concern should we now have for these rosters? Ryan, you want to take it?
Yeah, I mean, it's good for some of these teams, I suppose, to actually get a bit of a break in, because for teams like Luminosity, it's been a long road since the start of January. Them proving themselves as being a tier 1 team, whether they're still a tier 1 team, probably more tier 1.5, that kind of level. But they've very much been on the grind. It's been an absolute barrage of qualifiers to play through. So at least with teams like FaZe Clan Luminosity not qualifying, they get a bit of respite, some chance to potentially work more with Astra and new agents, potentially new maps, going off like the teasers and rumors, right? So they do get a bit of a time away to make sure that they don't burn out. In the overall grand scheme of things, though, it's all about champions points, right? And not being able to get any throughout stage 2, even if they bottom out in like the Challengers finals where they get 10, it's still better than not getting any, right? So I don't really think the FaZe LG are going to be too upset. Maybe the Orgs would be, but I doubt it that much. But like this could hamper them in the future, especially if FaZe go on a bit of a resurgence, do well. They could miss out by 10 or 20 points to actually qualify for like the Worlds event at the end of the year, right? So I think for stuff like that, the context really matters. And I don't see many people talking about it because nobody really understands the format that well at this point.
Sam, what do you think?
I think cause for concern is a very strong way of putting it, because we have to remember that only a certain number of teams are going to get anywhere. I mean, even these teams that have made it this far, only 4 of them go to Reykjavik. So at the end of the day,
it's 2. Yes, it's even less.
2, yeah, even less. 2 teams out of 8 or whatever it is that are now going to be competing against each other once we get to that point. So it's yes, the teams that have made it this far have clearly kind of differentiated themselves a little bit, but the competition is so stiff in both NA and EU, to be honest. And a lot of these teams have been beating each other quite frequently. So it's not like we have this kind of king of the hill thing going on. There is still opportunity for all of these teams to make a comeback going forward. Okay, them missing out on their opportunity for Reykjavik is really sad, and they're going to be super bummed about it, and so are their fans. But I don't think that's enough to say, well, we're now worried about this team. Will they ever come back from this? Oh no, what a crushing defeat. Nah, whatever. They'll, go again next time and, just be better on the day in future. Forehead.
I think overall with FaZe and Gen G as well, it did feel like the tactics side of it regressed a little bit, really, considering where they were before. We saw FaZe moving back to old comps, Gen G looking like very much the old Gen G of being very easy to read in how they use their utility and stuff. So it was a little bit out of sorts, and in the open single elimination brackets, you lose 2 games. And that's it. You just saw the drop off like that. So I do feel sorry for them to an extent, but like Sam said, the quality of teams that have come up, Cloud9, even T1 to an extent, and Version 1, those kind of teams, they're really making strides, and they're really wanting to beat some of these top teams.
I think one of the things, and I'm going to speak specifically to Gen G, because as we all know, I'm an MCE worshiper, fanboy. I'll wear that on my sleeve as a badge of honor. I'm not going to hide it. I think one of their biggest strengths is preparation for specific opponents. I think that they do that in a way that is better than most teams in the scene right now, just because of what we've seen from them. When they know their matchup, when they know what to expect, they're one of the best teams in the scene. Doesn't work in open qualifiers. You can have some idea, but the reality is you've got to make it through so many games before you get to the team where you would prep for specifically, right? That you can't really do it. You kind of got to go back to what your vanilla is and set up your defaults and work that way. Work your play your game, as players love to say, that cliche, as opposed to thinking about your opponent. But it doesn't work here, right? And as you said, they come out a little flat. They look like Gen G of old, where they're kind of just very readable, very predictable, and I'm not. I guess I'm not that shocked. It's a bummer for them, and that TSM matchup was a banger, and Wardell went God mode, which hasn't always been the case lately. So you can't have game plan for Wardell just dumping on you. So it's an interesting one. The teams that did make it through, with the exception of Sentinels, I find somewhat surprising. NRG is expected, I think. They've obviously did this, that, and the other thing. The NRG, take this guy out, swap this guy in. It's like Legos, you're just constantly pulling bricks apart and putting them together and building new things. Yeah. But they keep making it back to these events. They keep doing it consistently. T1... I feel like I've got such a bad taste in my mouth right now with this T1 roster, with the whole thing going on with
fraud and all that, yeah.
Fraud and
Stunner, yeah.
And Stunner and just I just don't. this org is just, there's just so much weird stuff going on with them that sometimes it's tough to just focus in on what they're actually doing in the server. But there's a lot of talent there. TSM, like, finally, you know, they're consistently making events. Like, hey, yeah, TSM, okay, let's do things. That's nice to see.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I won some pistol rounds. That was also, that happened. Yeah.
It's funny. I feel like this event is wide open. Looking at the 8 teams that are in there. Like, obviously, we're going to talk about it a lot. We're going to be doing a pre-show, folks, that'll be airing right before the game. But so we'll be breaking it down in more detail. But I do feel like this, as opposed to others events, feels much more wide open. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, I think the upset potential is there. Like, I could even see somebody like T1 coming in and being one of the qualifying teams, depending on the bracket, right? So it does feel like kind of who it is on the day, because all the sort of power rankings and expectations of teams have fallen flat because it has been a long road and teams are much better prepared for their opponents than some others. Anti-Stratton is just a part of the game, like Eco was saying, but I still feel sorry for teams like Sentinels and to a lesser extent like Immortals and stuff, because teams are out for blood on them in particular, and it's hard to adapt your playstyle every single time you play a game, right? It's so tough to move away from people that are just checking APIs and learning how you play the game.
Yeah. I think that it's also kind of a symptom of the type of tournament that we have, where in the first challenger or whatever, your like big powerhouse teams go through. So when it gets to like the second challenger, they're not there anymore. And so we don't have it this time around, but in stage 1, it went all the way to a third challenger. So at that point, the bracket was almost impossible to predict because it really could have gone any old which way. Now, at least, like, there's still big names that we know, we recognize, we've seen how they play. We have some semblance of an idea. But again, all the powerhouses have made it through. And now it's down to these teams who are fairly closely contested.
Well, I think the funny thing is 3 of the powerhouses didn't qualify, right? Like, if FaZe, Gen G, and LG were in this closed qualifier, were in Challengers 2, we'd be looking at them as favorites, probably, just based on past results and Masters and the like. And they're not in it. So it's like, yeah, yes, you're right. 4 of the powerhouses are already through. 4 of the teams that we look at to be perennial. Like, you're absolutely right about that. But also, like, 3 of the other big teams just didn't even get to the dance. Like, they can't show up in the spotlight because they're not on the dance floor. It's really interesting. I think this challenges is going to be really interesting at the end of the day. We're flapping through some of our transitions here. I do want to. I guess we should move on. We're running up against our time, or we're starting to run up against our time here. We started a bit late, so I'm going to be lenient with the clock.
Words.
Talking again, we're going to have a lot more words about Challengers 2. Again, you should watch the pre-show. Check out the pre-show before the Challengers 2 broadcast to see more of Press Forward and Defuse.
God.
But
get them out.
Let me just get up in your ears. Let's talk about the Summer Championship Open Qualifier briefly. We're going to touch on this. These are open qualifiers going on. This is the 3rd open qualifier. They feed into the monthly. Then points from this all goes into qualifying through to the Summer Champs. That's going to be a huge event this summer. It's going to be awesome when it actually does happen. But we've got a lot to get through first. So we're just going to touch on this briefly. But we got a video to walk you through what happened this past weekend. Roll it.
Exalt in a good spot. Looks in. 2 kills for Exalt. The double off the showstopper. The satchel's gonna hold him back even more. And now he's looking for the ace. That nade is big, but the spike's up planted over. Oh my word! Blade Storm, but can't take down Balin. Balin's still holding it down. Crossfired up with J. Cruel and Balin.
Renegades, they're not out of this just yet, but Exalt is starting to put on even more pressure.
I've got your track.
Quick one from Exalt. Oh! Leading through the smoke. Exalt ends up getting a headshot to Randy Savage. Randy Savage ends up getting picked back up DSR with another 2K. And Exalt is still around the corner. Renegades, they expend one of your revives. 2 kills. Randy Savage still around the corner. Has a chance to hold off this entire elevator push. Here comes Val in. Catching up to Koalanoob. He's trying to make up space. On top of Jenny, Balin on top again! The inspiration! Randy Savage now in a 1v4! Randy! Randy got it! Randy got it! It's at half!
Did he win it?
No! Randy Savage! Around the corner. Wants it down!
That's it.
CP2 puts a nail in the coffin. The Renegades.
I don't know how Gus keeps his vocal cords intact.
Honestly.
Listen to the way
I
he
don't
casts. I would be shredded. That's youth right there. That's youth.
Yeah, that doesn't last
Tea
forever.
with honey and lemon.
He's gonna get to 25 and not have a voice anymore. No, but still, you know, really good casting. Some amazing highlights coming out from that. Obviously, Renegades triumph. Renegades have won every single qualifier so far, so they're I mean they're making money off of that. But also they've got mad points. I don't really know how it's gonna stack up at the end, but I'd assume they're in great position to actually make the summer champs regardless of what happens in the rest of it. Winning 3 qualifiers back to back to back. They're just they're kind of running the open qual circuit right now.
Yeah, it's almost like the SpongeBob meme, I suppose, of like Renegades in like the Summer Championships being the buff one, and then Renegades in the VCT just being smooth SpongeBob. It's just 2 different teams, really. Like the amount that they frag out, but it is cool to see, you know, Complexity Knights do well in these kind of tournaments and show that they should still be considered. But it's just difficult with the amount of talent in VCT currently.
I feel like the points are just kind of icing on the cake for Renegade. So basically how it works, the Summer Champs will have 32 teams. 8 of those teams will come from each of the monthlies. 2 from each monthly makes up 8. The next 8 will come from a last chance qualifier just before the actual Summer Showdown. And the last 16 teams will come from the leaderboard by points. So like if Renegades come into like the monthly, I think the one coming up, it's like the May monthly, I think is the next one. April, yes, April, something like that. But if they win a monthly, they're automatically in. So like the points, but that's assuming, of course, they come in the top 2. So this is all like kind of their backup plan. Like, well, if for some or whatever reason we don't make it in one of the 4 monthlies, we're just going to make sure we have points. And then every time they win, it's like money in the pocket as well. So they're just kind of farming this tournament at this point.
The monthly is next Monday and Tuesday, 26th and 27th is when the monthly runs. So be sure to watch in. Be sure to tune into the NSG monthly. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think there's a prime opportunity they actually win a monthly, and then at that point, you're right, they don't care about the circuit points. But hey, make some money, get those circuit points regardless, and show yourself at the top of the board. It puts yourself on the top of a leaderboard if they can't qualify through the VCT leaderboard. All right,
I don't think that's happening for them unless they got a monster run and win Masters 3. I don't see that happening.
All right, we're gonna slide on to look towards the future. We're gonna look at Recon Bowl. We're gonna look towards the future. We got one thing. We're not gonna talk too much about it because obviously we've got a pre-show that we're gonna be running before these, so we want to save most of our thoughts for that. But Challengers 2, NA Challengers 2. We're gonna get the last 4 teams into the Challengers final. The last chance for your shot at Reykjavik. The last chance for a chance to qualify to play International Valorant, which is super exciting, super cool. This event, 8 teams enter. We talked about the 8 teams, 4 make it through. I just want to know one thing: who you got? Ryan, give me your 4 teams that are making it through this bracket.
Oh, I have to sort of work it. So I think Sentinels, they don't tend to fall off in situations like this. I want to say Immortals. They've obviously been underperforming ever since Masters 1, it feels like, and they haven't quite recovered since. But considering you've got TSM, BBG, and NRG, I do still think that Immortals are in a higher state than those teams. But again, it could be upset territory, could happen all on the day. The last 2, who would I have? I would say Cloud9, because I was very close to seeing Cloud9 qualify last time if it wasn't for that version 1 game. And then I need to work out who it would actually be that would sort of make their way up. So Mars would go there. I want to say NRG is my guess. But, like, again, we'll probably highlight this more tomorrow. I'll have a bit more of a think. But, yeah, they'd be my 4 teams.
Yeah, so
Sam?
Also Sentinels for me, because Anbox, I think I say this every time, but they get to exactly this point, and then they always just kind of get smacked out every time, without fail. And of course, their first matchup is against Sentinels. So I'm seeing Sentinels make it through there. My next one would be NRG, because they've been looking super fantastic recently. I'm not ready to put too much faith into TSM again because they've been looking weird. I mean, if Wardell pops off like he did this week in every game they have going forward, then yeah, sure, they won the whole thing. But they've been kind of on and off, so I'm not putting too much stock in that. I think, And also BBG, I don't want to put too much faith in. I know they beat Sentinels, but it seems like kind of one of those kind of, not fluke, but one of those like amazing games where they just performed out of their mind, but it's not like a regular thing. So I'm going to go with, what did I say? Sentinels, NRG, Immortals as well, and for my wild card, I'm going to go with T1.
Clearly a very well thought out prediction here. I like it. I like it. All right. I'm gonna hit you with mine. We're talking about it. I think this is one of the most wide open challengers closed that we've had. I think that this is really going to be interesting to actually follow along to get a sense of a lot of these teams. Sentinels, if you're going to pick against them, like, come on, you're just being a jerk for the sake of it. Like, Sentinels are probably going to make it through. If they don't, that would be an absolute shocker. And then I'm going with Cloud9 Blue, 100%, baby. Flopster in the server. You can't top the flop. Floppy gonna come in, just click heads, drop bombs. He's not even gonna know what the abilities do. He's gonna be throwing curveballs when he means to put up a wall. I don't even know what role he's playing, but he's gonna be popping some heads, clicking some faces, and dominating. So Cloud9 Blue making it through. Can't pick against my boy Floppy. He doesn't even need to know how the game works. He just needs to know how to click heads.
Topic bar.
I feel good about NRG. They're always a team where, like, every time I think I feel good about them, they disappoint me, but I'm going to say I feel good about them right now. I think this iteration of the shuffling cycle of players, of swapping out all the blocks and bricks and pieces and forming whatever they got, this time will work. My fourth team is the question mark. I feel like it's going to be BBG. I kind of want it to be TSM, but I think it's going to be BBG. I feel built by gamers. And now that's funny because I've now picked two teams that match up in the first round. So someone's going to have to make a lower bracket run to make me smart. But I have faith. I have faith. Am I smart?
Am I legitimately crazy thinking that Cloud9 and T1 might qualify?
My what?
I don't even know if it's possible. Like they both Cloud9 and T1 both qualify.
Yeah, you can absolutely do that.
Sentinels and Immortals. I'll have to work it out.
I mean, it's possible, but...
logistically possible, but whether it'll actually happen is...
The way it would work is one of them wins the first matchup and then matches up against presumably Sentinels. But I think even if they lose that Sentinels matchup, they'll be on opposite sides of the lower bracket. I'd have to confirm that, but I think there's still a way to make it to top 4.
So I'm saying that TSM, Build by Gamers, NRG, and Ambox don't qualify.
That's what you're saying.
I'm okay with that. I'm all right. I'm happy with that. Happy for those teams to prove me wrong.
Again, it's so wide open. I think apart from the only pick I'm 100% confident in, and I will be shocked if it doesn't come true, is Sentinels making it through. And that's just for obvious reasons. They just won the Masters. Yeah. They're nuts. They are the best team in NA.
Yeah, losing one series can definitely happen. Losing two, I just don't see them. They've gone down to the losers bracket and then won that event, right? So I can see something happening there that.
We've got the double elimination. We've got everything set up. Like, this should be fine. They got upset on the week where they had no prep, where they had just won Masters, and they had to turn around and go back into qualifiers because the system is broken. Picking against them is foolishness. We're going to wrap up our show here, though, folks, on that note. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's a blast as always. If you enjoyed Press Forward to Defuse, please do follow this channel. We go live every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard, or slightly thereafter, like today. If you enjoyed the show, please consider following us. You can find our ats down below our faces as well. Good people to follow for the Valorant scene, specifically Sam and Ryan. Definitely do follow them. Keep track of them as well. And before the VCT games this weekend, be sure to tune in. Thursday and Saturday, we're going to be running a VCT pre-show. You won't want to miss it. It'll be our three faces talking about what's going on there. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.